Hi, Timothy. Thanks for joining me. Could you tell us a bit about what you do?
So my name is Timothy Connor, as you can see. I'm a fairly long time resident of Tokyo, Japan, and I've been involved in consumer products and services for most of my career. I currently am CEO of Synnovate, and Synnovate, here's the T-shirt, there's the name. I established Synnovate in order to take advantage of my skill sets as practice area. So the one line elevator pitch is I help brands and companies evaluate, enter, and succeed in the Japanese market. And so I've
Awesome.
worked with a wide variety of companies over this period of time, including startups.
You help companies from mostly, I guess, the English-speaking world or the Western world broadly reach market entry in Japan. Is that right? And do you also help in the other direction, Japanese companies enter English-speaking markets?
And primarily, it's English-speaking markets where my clients come from. There are some from places like Taiwan and Korea, near places, but the basis is to come in through the English-speaking channel. And yes, it's the entry point, if you will, or the beginning of discussions could be about evaluating the market. It could also be about help us with a product that's not doing well. Could be can you help put together a better omni-channel ecosystem for us? And we want to start an e-commerce channel. Any of those things. Sometimes it's actually, can you represent our brand in Japan, which is something I also do.
You speak you speak Japanese, right?
Yeah.
How did you learn it? How was the experience of learning Japanese?
I initially learned French, and so I was fluent in French when I got here. I didn't realize that it would disappear over time. I still have some left, but I think I've been able to understand how to learn language as well. And so um, I made sure to make the effort to learn both reading, writing, speaking, etc. When I arrived, and so it meant sort of stepping out of the comfort zone at times to sort of actually try to speak to people, but I made use of books, TV, whatever I could. But it's a tough language to learn.
The Japanese market? What's the market entry process like?
For most companies and brands, Japan seems very familiar to people because it's been in the news for decades and decades. And the reality is that it's actually not that familiar. I recommend starting with a market discovery project to find out how big is the market, who are the competitors, importantly, what is the distribution system for your industry? Are there other similar products? And do you actually have a value proposition for this market? There are specific keys to the Japanese markets. Most of the cities are very crowded. English is not widely spoken. Um, the business systems and organizations and the culture in general are based on trust. Trust comes from some long-term built-up relationship, and you don't arrive with a deck and go to see a customer pitch and expect to go home with an order. Some people expect to go home with an order, but it never happens. And so
Interesting.
they do say, Japan is, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So people do need to have brands need to have patience, resources to support that, and a true desire to get in. Because once you're in, Japanese customers are famously extremely loyal, and so it's always worth the effort. But it does take 3 times as long as you expect it to. One of the best ways is to meet people as soon as possible face to face and just have a chat, let them get to know me. It's really a question of over and over again meeting people, meeting people. Sometimes it takes 6 months, not always, but it can take a while. But that's how I do it. And I also uh, like to demonstrate that the client, whoever I'm representing, is serious about Japan. So one of the tricky things is often your counterparty will ask you, so do they have a presence in Japan? Um, and if they don't, If they don't, they'll say, well, okay, when they have a presence here, call me back. So a client or a brand that's serious about Japan needs to be serious about establishing some kind of presence. And it doesn't have to be you know, buying an apartment or setting up a company with 10 employees. There are many ways to do it. There's virtual presence, there's representation, etc. And I offer advice on all of those things to companies.
How do you find your actual customers? Do you find it's mostly them that know you and approach you, or do you outreach to them? And how do you get known as somebody that can facilitate those kind of business services?
In my case, I reach out to some. I'm introduced to quite a few, and I do quite a lot of networking. There's a lot of networking events in Tokyo. I do a lot of. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. There's a podcast that I did recently about leadership, for example, and these often lead to inquiry, as do introductions from previous clients or from people that I know.
You mentioned Japanese customers are super loyal to brands. So
Yeah.
once they're into that relationship, they usually stay with the given brand. Is there any other unique things about Japanese consumers you can share?
Well, one important one is that the Japanese customer journey, so to speak, from entering the funnel of awareness of a brand, is famously long and very convoluted. And I would say customer journeys in Japan range anywhere from 4 to 10 touch points. In other words, they become aware somehow, maybe it's TV or through a friend. They will check online, then they will check on Amazon. And if there's a store, they'll go check out the store. Then they'll come back and they'll ask their friends. And then they'll go back and they'll check with some other people. They'll look on some of the community sites in Japan. And they'll gather a lot of information, a lot of third party, because word of mouth is very, very strong and influential in Japan. They do read those. They do read those reviews on Amazon.
You have quite a wide range base of clients you help enter the Japanese market. I mean, do they have any similarities? Is there a specific trend or thing that Japanese consumers crave that these outsider companies are able to provide?
In my case, a lot of the client products and brands are consumer related. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy because for a brand or a brand name that's well known someplace, but that right away gets you one leg up, so to speak, with Japanese consumers, because you can say top seller in the United States or most famous luggage brand in the UK or whatever. That helps you right away because it gives you social proof. On the other side is that it takes a while for Japanese consumers to actually buy something that they've not purchased before or that other people have not purchased. Often and companies do this as well, is they'll wait until they know somebody or they see somebody else has purchased it, and then they'll purchase. You know, the extreme is the influencer thing. Some well-known person buys and uses a product, and so people go out and buy it just to try. There's very much I don't want to be the first to try something going on. They like to gather a lot of information because they want to what I call de-risk any purchase.
Okay, interesting. So they're much more cautious. So would you say, I guess as a whole, there's a lot less impulse buying?
There is, yes.
And since you mentioned social proof and the impact of influencers, one thing that was interesting in Korea is a lot of the tools that people interact with. I'm thinking about like people message between each other with Kakao Chat, or they have kind of like reviews of businesses through Naver Cafe. And there's a few things like this, different platforms that us in Europe, I mean, we're all using WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and we're not even aware of these different platforms. And I'm kind of curious, how is it in Japan? Do they have their own kind of tools and ecosystem that are like separate from these US based tech companies?
Oh, very much so. Very few Japanese, unless they have counterparts in the United States or Europe, use WhatsApp. Here, the default messaging app with a 90 penetration rate is called line, and line comes from Naver, of course. And the line in Japan now is a 50-50 joint thing with Naver and SoftBank. But you didn't hear it first, but expect that to change. Line is it's its own ecosystem, and it's the default way of communicating, even among non-Japanese. Possibly, probably followed by Messenger.
So when a client approaches you, do you go that far in the kind of market entry process? I mean, I assume you like might give recommendations and tell them you have to be present on this tool, this platform. Do you implement that as well, or is your role more consultation, or is it as well
But
implementation?
in the market discovery process, it's I identify tools that they should use, and that's the end of the market discovery. And then the purpose for that is for the brand of the company to evaluate whether they want to dedicate the resources and the time to the Japanese market. And if they do, then we sit down and we work out a roadmap, if you will. What do they need to do first? What do they start off doing? What are the bare minimums that they should do to get a presence? Is there a way to, what's the best way to sell for them in Japan? And
It's
so
pretty much it's pretty much a tailored approach to match what the client needs.
it is because depending on the product or service, the channels and things change.
Mm, completely.
But yeah, I put up I usually provide, I'm going to give you a roadmap and it's going to take this long to put together, and we'll work through it and we can implement at a certain stage. My fee will be this. And if they want to go through with it, then we shake hands and get started.
How do you price your services? Do you price them on a project base or hourly base?
Well, the market discovery project is a project base. And then after that, I can work on project basis if it's a very specific deliverable, but I usually work on a retainer of some kind, and the retainer is based on the the scope, which is basically the amount of time that we need to do for I would a minimum 3 months, because it's going to take time to get meetings and actually do the meetings and follow up meetings and
Right.
things.
How about your day to day? How do you organize your day? Is there specific tools or methods you like to use personally?
I have several Slack channels that I'm involved in. There's the Slack channel with Google Startups. There's the Slack channel with my digital agency. Um, I'm a mentor for TechStars Tokyo, and so there's a TechStars Slack, and so I have those, and that's one of the big communication platforms that I use.
Um, But since you mentor startups, some of these startups, I mean, I'm sure most of them are from Japanese citizens. Do you have any foreign kind of incoming startups there as well?
Yes, half are from overseas and half are from Japan.
Okay. Is that a recent trend, or is that been going on for quite a time?
So for Techstars Tokyo, this is their first cohort. So I think it was designed to be half and half.
Because I've seen a few headlines saying that the Japanese government is sort of investing to try and make Japan more attractive foreign startups. How would you say that goal is going?
One of the I mean, you mentioned earlier, taking Japanese companies overseas. I mean, I do work with, on a kind of a light basis for now, some Japanese brands and products that want to go overseas. I'm also in discussions with a couple of organizations about what I call the Go Global program for Japanese SMEs and startups to go global, to go overseas. And what I've described earlier works for both, SMEs, established brands, and startups as well. The things that you need to do in a startup in the first 3 years are very similar to what you need to do to get your brand or company going in Japan in the first 3 years.
So how did you come to Japan in the first place? Well, because you've been there around 20-25 years, right?
I came on the JET program, actually.
The teaching, that's the teaching
Yeah,
program, right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. I came on the JET program. I left that and I spent a few years in Tokyo going to design school in the morning and managing an English school in the evening. I moved into more uh, retainer-based help for that English company, and I launched my first creative business, design business, which unfortunately did not go that well. That sent me back into corporate life, and where I was mostly focused on strategy and marketing and growth in the Japanese market, that's kind of been my trajectory ever since.
How is Are you using AI a lot in your job? How are you seeing the AI stuff? What's your perspective on it? And how do you help your clients potentially adapt to it?
Well, I use a number of the chat tools for things like what's good for market research. It's good for gathering specific information. I find even with the same prompts, they all come back with very different answers, which is very interesting. And ultimately, it's me, the human, who has to aggregate those, which is
Yeah.
fine.
But fundamentally, it doesn't really change your job, but maybe it makes it a bit quicker uh,
That's right.
in the process. Okay.
That's right. I don't do much with imagery, so I'm not working much with mid-journey.
This is the third company you've launched. Is that correct?
This would be the third one, yes.
Okay. Would you do you have any? And you also mentioned you mentor. What's the kind of advice you would give to someone who wants to launch their own startup or company?
I think launching in Japan and launching a company they have similar challenges. What I would say is if you look at my logo, you see it's a rose. Many people think that roses are difficult to raise. Roses are not that hard to raise, actually, but you have to study and you have to learn what to do. And once you get them going, they're very hardy, very sturdy plants. Um, bar putting poison on them, they just don't die. And the Japan market is the same, and starting a startup is the same. You really have to do your homework. You need to ask for advice from people who know, from experts in the market, get their guidance, stay on the right track. But once you get in the groove, so to speak, and you get going, and in a startup, if you get product market fit, or if your product in Japan starts selling and you gain customers, they will stay with you. And you'll have a very robust business model as long as you maintain their trust. And I think that's true of startups and customers and staff as with entering the market. One of the over time, what I've done, I teach a course called Venture Management at a graduate school here in English, and it's all about virtually experiencing the stages of a startup, which could be stages of entering a Japan market, from the idea stage through growth, through organizing the business, to looking at an IPO or an M&A offer. What I often say is patience, resource, and a little bit more patience.
Awesome. That's great. I think that's a great way to conclude our chat. Yeah, I mean, thanks so much for taking part in this. Is there anything else you think we should talk about, or some message or some aspect of your work you want to share?
Well, I would share that it's a great market. It's not easy in the sense that it takes time and resources, but it's always worthwhile if you put the time in. Uh, I am open to all kinds of inquiries and comments, etc. Find me on LinkedIn. Timothy Connor will come right up on LinkedIn. You can DM me there. You can comment on any of my posts, etc. And I'm always open to any kind of inquiry, comments, and questions anytime.